In this video, we're going to talk about Rabeinu Asher ben Yechiel, also known as the Rosh. It's the acronym for Rabeinu Asher. He was born in approximately the year 1250 in Cologne, Germany. His father, Rabbi Yechiel, was an amazing rabbi in his own right. It's brought down in the writings of Rabbi Chaim Vital, a very interesting story about him that before he passed away, he made a deal with a friend that they would share all the merits of all the mitzvahs they had done. They would share it together in the world to come. So this rabbi, his chavrusa, whose name was Rabbi Shlomo, when Rabbi Yechiel passed away, he came to the funeral, and they put the custom in Germany was they would put the casket on a rock. They would open it up and make sure everything was good, and they would close it back up. So when they opened up the casket to check what was going on, this Rabbi Shlomo comes running and says, "Rabbi Yechiel, remember our deal that we were in heaven, that we're going to share all our merits together." And they said that he smiled, even though he had passed away the day or two before. So obviously a very special rabbi in his own right. And the next day, Rabbi Shlomo is sitting in the study hall, and Rabbi Yechiel shows up. He says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Yeah, I'm in heaven. I have a special place, and I'm with all these rabbis in heaven, but I was given permission to come down here, just like Rabbi Yehuda Anasi was given permission to come back down to earth in his physical form." And he's similar to Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. He did not want to come visit his family for making other rabbis jealous that they were not able to do that. However, there was a story that when a crusade was coming through town, he did come visit his wife and told her to leave the house immediately and to run for their lives, which is what they did. And thereby, Rabeinu Asher and his siblings were saved, and his mother were saved from this terrible crusade. Rabeinu Asher became a rabbi in the city of Worms. Basically, he was a student of one of the great rabbis of his time was Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg. Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg was the rabbi in Worms at the time, I believe. He was denounced by the government and held in ransom in a prison, held for ransom. And so Rabeinu Asher, being his most prized student, raised all the money in order to redeem him from prison. However, Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg refused to leave prison because he said, if you pay the ransom, they're just going to do it again. They're going to say, well, look, it's a free for all for anybody to kidnap a rabbi, and the Jewish community will refuse to will just pay, and then they'll just keep doing it. So he refused to leave prison, and he ended up passing away in prison, and eventually his body was ransomed, and they did pay some sort of ransom to get him to a Jewish burial. I believe it was years after his passing. At any rate, because of this, Rabeinu Asher became the rabbi in Worms in his teacher's stead, because his teacher was in prison. Eventually, it's not clear why exactly, but it could be because of this incident with him raising the money and advocating for his rabbi, for his teacher, Rabbi Meir. He ends up running for his life from Germany and runs to Spain. He is given he is kind of praised by the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, a famous Spanish rabbi, and he is given a position as the rabbi of Toledo, Spain. He gets there with his family, and he ends up passing away there in approximately the year 1327. He was known for a few things. First of all, he was kind of the cap of the Tosafist age that we discussed previously, where Rashi was the beginning of that era, and Rabeinu Asher was really an end of that era. He actually wrote his own kind of Tosafist, these additions to the Talmud, his commentary on the Talmud, in his own style with his own conclusions based on the teachings of the previous generations. He's also probably most famous for writing his book of Halachot, which of Jewish law. And this code is also in the back of every Talmud since the publication of his book is printed in the back. And it's similar to the Rif, where he writes an anthology of the Talmud. However, this is already, in the 14th century, many, many years after we already have a few generations of the Rishonim, of the commentators on the Talmud. like the Rambam, like the Rif, like the Tosafists, and he starts to quote them. So it's not just an anthology of the Talmud, but it includes an anthology of many, many laws quoted and customs quoted by previous rabbis in the earlier generations of the Rishonim, and not just from the Talmud itself. He's also famous for his strict adherence to Jewish studies, and not he tried to create a ban on non-Jewish studies, and he felt that it was not permissible to study secular wisdoms like mathematics and sciences, etc. And till this day, there is kind of still this struggle within the Jewish community of, how much do we just focus on Jewish studies and how much do we take secular studies into account, and so on. And specifically, this tension was very much felt because coming to Spanish Jewry had embraced this idea that you had, great rabbis like the Rambam, Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid, and others who were, very well politically connected rabbis, as well as great scientists, astrologers, and that was kind of the Jewish community of Spain was very much involved in these studies, and the Rosh coming from Germany, where his kind of outlook was more dominant of, we're focusing on Talmud, we're focusing on Jewish law, we're focusing on studying Judaism, and we're not going to study other studies. So this kind of tension that he brought with him ended up coming out a lot, and he did change in a way. He kind of maybe was that pendulum swinging the other way in the Spanish Jewish community of now, we're not going to be totally involved in the secular studies. We're going to take a step back and focus more on Judaism, and that did make a difference at that time. He is regarded as one of the greatest halachic decisors of his era, of his generation, and even though he ended up being a rabbi in Spain for many years, he is really well known as one of the greatest Askenazic rabbis from Germany, because he really did focus on the customs of Germany. Maybe there was a reaction to the fact that he was in a Spanish community. So he felt the need to preserve these customs, and the way of preaching Jewish law or teaching Jewish law in that was his style, was to the Ashkenazi Tosafist style versus the Spanish style. Another thing he was famous for was his view on the Gaonic period. Were the teachings of the Gaonim, were they binding or not? The way the Talmudic teachings were binding. He felt they were not as binding as the Talmudic teachings, and therefore some of the Gaonic practices could be put to the side if he felt necessary. At any rate, the Rosh ends up, his son Rabbi Yaakov, which we'll talk about next time, ends up writing one of the greatest codes of Jewish law, that ends up being the basis for all codes pretty much to this day, based on his father's teachings. And Rabbi Yosef Karo, in his Shulchan Aruch, in his code of Jewish law, quotes the Rosh as the third of the great pillars of Jewish law, even though, again, the Rosh was a Ashkenazi rabbi primarily, and it definitely in his style of teaching, even though he, like we said, he was living in Toledo when he passed away. Together with the Rambam and the Rif, he ends up being the third pillar of Jewish law, and all Jewish law kind of flows through him. And to this day, we study, like we said, in the back of the Talmud, the Rosh is studied, and it becomes the basis for many Jewish laws, codified in what his son's code and later in the Shulchan Aruch. If you have any comments, questions, theories, something I missed, something I should have said, please put it in the comments below. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.